Very good afternoon to all of you, and I welcome you all to this afternoon's seminar. We are really fortunate to have with us Dr. Malamud as a speaker today, and he's going to speak about public library of India. Just a few words of introduction, aside from what I had sent by way of the IISc. I first heard Carl when he was a part of the panel that we had to celebrate the Open Access Week in October. So at that time, we all suggested to Professor Arunachal that it would be nice to have him back here with us to listen to the talk. And that is what has happened. And Professor Arunachal made all the arrangements. But unfortunately, Professor Arunachal is not here, but we are glad Carl should still make it. Carl is the founder and president of public.resource.org, whose motto is making government information more accessible. And he and his colleagues have managed to make a lot of government information, mostly by way of laws, statutes, codes, building codes, fire safety codes, and things of that nature, and then brought them to the internet. And along the way, they have had to fight quite a few court battles, and interestingly, he is also involved in a public interest litigation in India, in which the Bureau of Indian Standards is sort of resisting getting their standards out into the public domain, and that case is going on in the Delhi High Court as well. Carl, of course, has a very prolific presence on the internet. Through his articles, videos of lectures at different places, and of course his feeds. And so just yesterday he posted stuff about about the progress that he has made in his efforts in getting a lot of Indian content online. And he was just telling us that he has managed to get some 400,000 plus documents from the gazettes of India into the archive at our website. So it is indeed a privilege for us to be able to listen to him in person. And so with those few words of introduction,
thank you, Professor Abhinandan. I'm sorry, I'm just so bad with Indian names sometimes. Thank you so much for inviting me today. I'd like to talk about a vision of a public library of India, but first I want to give you a few words about how I got there. So in the U.S., for about 30 years, my focus has been on making government information available on the internet. I put the U.S. Patent Database online, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, in both cases over the objections of the various government agencies, and then engaged in a battle that eventually got the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, to take my code over. I actually loaned them computers and got them up and running. And so my goal has always been to show by doing, to go into these government folks and not say, you're bad, you're stupid, you're corrupt, but say, listen, maybe you have not understood the potential of the internet as a way of distributing information. Can I help you? And sometimes people accept the help, and sometimes they don't. So my focus has been pretty much on government information, but in 2010, I went and saw a Professor Darton, Robert Darton at Harvard, a very famous historian of the book, and we got to talking about the potential for scanning every book in the United States. And we brought in John Palfrey, who was a professor at Harvard University, and we created the Digital Public Library of America. And we had a summit meeting. We had the Archivist of the United States and the Law Librarian of Congress and all sorts of publishers, a person from Google who was doing Google Books. And the vision was, what if we could scan everything? I wrote a letter to President Obama with my friend John Podesta, who I used to work for. And I put it on yeswescan.org. President Obama was Yes We Can. And it said, if we can put a man on the moon, why can't we launch the Library of Congress into cyberspace? And I suggested that the president should begin a long-term effort of digitizing every federal resource And if we don't start now, we're never going to get it done. So the DPLA and my efforts to get the government going just got muddled. DPLA ended up doing metadata. They brought in some foundation grants, and then, it's a fancy card catalog. It's not that different than the National Digital Library of India. You can look up books, and there's some ebooks available, and they're doing good work, but this vision of let's scan everything didn't work. And I remember going into the White House and talking to my friend, the Chief Technology Officer. I said, we really ought to do this. And he just stopped. He said, Carl, we have 2 wars. There's a financial meltdown. The Republicans hate us. This is a great idea, but it's not going to be on the stack today. Right? So it's hard to get something like this actually on the agenda. So I was doing the law, and that was my focus. I actually dropped out of the Digital Public Library of America effort once I realized they were not going to embrace this vision of particularly scanning all the government works. And I went back to doing the law. And I started putting standards, technical standards like building codes that are required by law online. And in the United States, they're done by private bodies, standards development organizations, nonprofits, but nonprofits that pay their CEOs over $1 million a year. The American National Standards Institute pays their CEO $2.2 million a year. They're a $40 million a year operation. More than, I think it's 20% of their revenue goes to compensate senior managers. So they're making a lot of money at the top on this thing. And their argument is they have to have the rights to sell these standards, because if they don't have that right, they need the money to develop high-quality codes. And if they can't develop high-quality codes, and they actually told me this, babies will die. Now, I sort of agree with that. Now, you got to remember that standards are made by volunteers, right? It's like scientific journals. They're not paid. It's professors like yourself and government bureaucrats and engineers and firefighters that go in and make the standards. So the standards development organizations don't really have to pay for that. And they are paying for these salaries. They also, in the case of these SDO, standard development organizations in the U.S., they want them to be the law. The National Electrical Code is the law in all 50 states and at the federal level. They want them to be the law, but they want the right for a private party to decide who will read them, under what circumstances, how much they will cost, what formats they are available, and most importantly, once you bought the standards, I think they ought to be free, but I spent $250,000 buying standards. Once they're free, once you have them, you ought to be able to reformat them, type them into HTML, redraw the diagrams, make them accessible to the visually impaired, make them work on your cell phone. And they were saying, no, you can't do that. So I had posted all those standards, and I'm being sued in the U.S. for this. And I went again to the White House and told the CTO what I was doing. He said, well, you need to meet my friend Sam Petroda, Chief Technology Officer of India. He goes, well, actually, he's not really a CTO, right? CTO, and he explained, they had a summit meeting. Malamud saying one end of the long table, Obama on the other end. So Anish Chopra was like way in the back on one of those seats for the staff aides. Sam Petroda was right next to Obama. So as you may know, Sam Petroda was a cabinet minister under Rajiv Gandhi. He put a telephone in every village in India. He was in the cabinet of Manmohan Hussain. And so I went to see him. And I said, I wanted to talk to you about Indian standards. And he said, well, tell me about these things. Why do they cost money? Because in India, this is the Bureau of Indian Standards. It's a government organization that makes them. He's like, why do they cost money? I said, well, that's how they do it all over the world. They're copyrighted. Indian building code is 14,000 rupees. And so we talked for a while, and he said, well, I just don't understand. I said, well, I'm thinking of posting these all on the internet. And I brought copies of ones that I had already scanned, and I had a cover sheet on them. He said, this is good, you should do it. I said, well, the Bureau of Indian Standards would be very annoying when I do this. He goes, I don't care. And so I put all 19,000 standards online. And in India, these are the law, right? They are developed by the government. They are noticed in the official gazettes. They cover things like the Building Code of India says proper egress in case of fire, right? And so if you're a school headmaster or you run a hospital, there are certain requirements on doors that people can get out of, and the structural stability of buildings. There are standards for the safety of toys. There are standards for the safety of textile manufacturing machines, right? Any person working in a factory ought to be able to look at their machine and say, I don't know if this is safe. They will pull up that standard. Hazardous material transport on roads. And unless we know what those standards are, we can't enforce public safety as citizens. We can't look at our buildings and say if they're okay. So the Bureau objected to what I did. After they were all online, they're still online. I didn't get sued, but they objected and they cut me off. They said, we're not going to sell you any more standards. And so we appealed to the ministry, and the ministry turned us down. And so we're doing public interest litigation. My co-petitioners are Srinivas Kodali, who you may know from his efforts on Aadhaar and most recently on electoral rolls in Hyderabad and the recent state elections, and Sushant Sinha, who does Indian Canoe. Salman Khurshid and Nishit Desai are our lawyers. Salman is arguing in front of the High Court of Delhi. We are back on February 4th, and we are hoping that we will win. And our positions are the law, and there's no copyright on the law in India. The Bureau's position is somewhat muddied and long and complicated, but they'll get their opportunity to explain it to the judge. So, that's the background. That's what brought me to India. My friend Sam called me up after I had been putting the standards online. He said, you must come to India. And so I spent a week with him. We went to Sabarmati Ashram on Gandhiji's birthday and did a workshop on nonviolence, which was a real thrill. We toured the country and he gave speeches. And, every time he gave a speech, 1,000 people in the audience and huge garlands, and it was a big deal. It was a lot of fun. And I went to see him in San Francisco one day. His grandkids live there. And he said, you got a stick? What? USB drive. And so I pulled one out and handed it to him, and he sticks it in his laptop, and we talked. And he finally hands it back to me. I said, what is this, Sam? Collected works of Mahatma Gandhi. Electronic version. And he said, where'd you get it? Sabarmati Ashram. And I was like, what are they going to do with it? Well, they're going to post it on the internet. They're still working on their website. And I said, well, can I post that? He said, of course. Won't the Sabarmati Ashram be a bit annoyed? Works of Gandhi must be available. And so I posted them online, and in fact, the ashram was a little annoyed at first. But we have since become very good friends. Dina Patel is the editor of the electronic edition and has done a labor of love to create what is really an amazing piece of work. And so I posted them on the Internet Archive. And I figured since I was doing that, I put it in a collection I called Hind Swaraj. And I started looking around. I noticed there were 129 audio files of Gandhiji speaking on All India Radio at the post-prayer meeting speeches that he gave during the last year of his life, 1947 and 1948. And so I posted those, and then out of the collected works, I turned the translation of his speeches into HTML, so I put that under the speech. And I made all the footnotes live, as well as the volume numbers. So you can listen to the speech, you can read the English translation, and then you can click into the collected works, and you can read what he said that day, letters he wrote the previous day. You can actually walk through the last year of his amazing life. And I looked around, and I found 60 volumes of the selected works of Nehru on a government server. And they were inside of a screen reader, right? You could flip page to page, but there was no download to the whole thing. And so I downloaded the whole thing. And I noticed they were missing 10 volumes. And so I purchased those and scanned them. So we actually now have the most complete collection of the works of Nehru. Same thing with the works of Ambedkar. The Maharashtra government had most of the volumes, but they were missing the last 6. And so I added those. And I kept adding stuff. And then I discovered the Publications Division of the Ministry of Information. Now, I don't know if you know this, but your government is one of the largest publishers in India, if not the largest. And I discovered the Publications Division had the bookstore. And so I went in there and I looked, and they have amazing stuff. They have a 60-volume series of the builders of modern India. Each one is a famous historian. They have folk tales of the Kashmir. They have books about the lamps of India or how to wear a sari. They have all the prime minister and presidential speeches. And so the first day I walked in there, I ended up buying so much I got a 40% discount. I walked out with 4 huge bags of books. And they're like, where's your driver, sir? So I'll call him Uber. So bundled into the Uber, brought it back to my hotel, and actually brought him home with me as checked luggage. and scan those. And every time I come to India, I buy more. And when I'm home, I look on eBooks and Amazon, and I look for things. So I've added many of the works of Radhakrishnan, the letters of Motilal Nehru, a lot of interesting Netaji, both speeches and talks. I started buying books from the Archaeological Survey of India. Now, all of these books have a copyright assertion on them. They say, copyright, Government of India, all rights reserved. So what I'm doing is a little bit risky. Now, my use is non-commercial. The purpose of this is disseminating this information. They sell them very cheaply. They're not making any money. But it's not out of the question that somebody from the government is going to knock on my door one of these days and say, what in the world are you doing? And my hope, by the way, whenever I come to India, I bring a little disk drive with the whole Hind Swaraj collection on it. I bring 6 copies. And I put a gold Gandhi sticker on the front. I call them Gandhi drives, little 1 terabyte drives. And I give them to universities. I give them to anybody that might use them. I would love to present the publications division. I don't think they know that we've got, 300-400 of their books scanned. And many of these are totally out of print. They don't even have them anymore. Archaeological Survey. I've gone to the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, so I have books on the onion and the mango and, nice scholarly treatises aimed at farmers and agricultural development people, probably 50 of those. Most recently, I discovered the Asian Educational Services. Now, this was a private publisher. Mr. Jetley started in 1978, and he does reprints of old books, 1700s, 1800s, and they're beautifully done. Nice leather covers. They're sold pretty cheap, and I've been buying them for a while. And, technically, under copyright law, I could have ripped the covers off, right, the title page, and scanned the inside, which is just a facsimile of the old book. And that would have been legal, but I wasn't going to do that. The guy's making his living doing this, and he's providing a good service, and they're beautiful books. I was in Bari Sons in Khan Market in Delhi, big bookstore, in October. And the manager knows me. I buy those books. And he came up and, how are you doing? Just fine. And I was looking at the AES books, and he goes, he's gone out of business. His son had started running the business. And about a year ago, he called it quits. He gave his inventory to some library, and he's out of business. And so I bought everything I could get from Bari Sons and shipped them home. That was 130 kilos of books. That was my October trip. So this trip, I cleaned out everything that was left at Bari Sons, and I went to Blossoms. And they have huge stacks of these things. And I spent hours and hours with my catalog from AES checking them off. And, huge stacks, and behind that will be another stack. And I just sat there pulling the books off. Do I have it? Do I not have it? I've ended up with 203 kilos of books, and those are being shipped back. So the first 106 are already online, and we ought to be at 400 or 500. This is amazing stuff. There's a Panini grammar translated into English, but also with a Sanskrit version. There's priests that were in Tamil Nadu and write, translations of many of the religious texts. There's just amazing stuff, much of it by Westerners, but also a lot of Indian authors. And I just didn't want this stuff to disappear. There's other reprint publishers that are online, but they charge a lot of money, and their quality isn't very good. I mean, they'll charge $30 for a real cheap paperback. And they're not making them available. And so this just seemed an opportunity to make this literature available. So that's the Hind Swaraj collection. That's carefully curated. Those are scanned very well, right? 600 dots per inch. Their OCR is run on them if they're English or German or any of the Latin languages. So that's stuff that I pretty much purchased and selected myself. There's another database. So the government of India had something called the Digital Library of India. It began with something called the Million Books Project that Professor Raj Reddy had this vision. And he got people in China and India to start scanning. And so the government of India did this, and they had 10 scan centers, and they scanned about 550,000 books. And I discovered the server. I was actually very sick on my way home. I was over at my friend Dinesh Trivedi's house. Sam Petroda and I were staying there. And Sam was on the phone, and, bank CEOs were coming to pay their respects. And I was just sick. I was on the couch and on my laptop. And so I wrote a little script that said, I wonder if I can download these. And when I got home, I had downloaded 100 books. And for the next 9 months, I started draining that database. I had 20 scripts going. Now, this server was awful. It kept going down. They lose domain name service. I ended up hard-coding the IP addresses. Every morning I'd get up and check my scripts, and many of them had failed. Some of their books were like 4 gigabytes, which is, I mean, how can you scan a 200-page book and make it that big? So I knew that there were some problematic issues, but I finally ended up with about 450,000 books. And looked at them, talked to Bruce Jekyll, and we talked about it. So, you know, I don't work for the Internet Archive. I'm a large user, but it's not my archive, it's his. And I said, well, I've got all these books, 450,000. That's an awful lot of books, Carl. He's got 5 million books, so this is 10% of his collection. And he looked at it and said, you know, there's a lot of duplicates in here. I said, yeah, the scans are really bad. I said, yeah, but it's the only version of many of these books that are available. And so I uploaded them to the Internet Archive. Now, they were sloppy when they did their copyright analysis on these books. And I knew there was an issue when I uploaded it. So when I uploaded it, I immediately got a few takedowns. University of North Carolina Press sent us a note. Well, you know, we're big fans of Brewster Kahle. Normally we wouldn't care, but we're monetizing our backlist, and here are 5 of our books. And so I looked in our database, and it turns out we had another 20 of their books as well. And so we wrote them back and said all 25 had been removed. And they were like, okay, that's fine. This is how you deal with copyright on a large library. There's always going to be issues. Now, here's what happened on the other side. There was a crazy Russian whose father had written the book, and he discovered his book. Now, with the Digital Library of India, that was not SEO optimized, search engine optimized, so Google was unable to crawl the system, right? So when you searched in Google, you never saw anything. Internet Archive is perfectly SEO optimized. And so the guy was searching for his name or his father's name, found the book, and went ballistic. He knew Raj Reddy, he knew the other professor that was involved, and called them up, and he was going to sue, he was going to take their house. And so these guys called the government up, and everybody freaked out. So they took the government server down. And they sent me notes saying, you must delete all the books. We're not going to delete the books. We might make them not visible to the world, but we're an archive, and eventually they're going to be out of copyright, right? I mean, so if we have to keep them for 70 years, we will. And so what I did is I dialed it back to about 1923. That got me about 200,000 copies. And I kept getting notes saying, you must delete them, you must delete them. And I was like, no, we're not going to do that. And so I did my own copyright analysis. I pulled all 450,000 titles, the metadata, up in a spreadsheet, and I sorted it by date and by creator. And so, you know, if it was Oxford Press and, you know, after 1970, that's in copyright. Remove it. If it's Government of India, it's fine. And I knocked about 50,000 copies out as being in copyright. So that brought me to 400,000 books, and I made them all go live again. Now, what the government did is they put their server down. This has been a year and a half now. It's still not back up. They sent a task force of government people out to the 10 different scan centers, and they are going through the books one by one, trying to decide this is okay, that's not okay. And, you know, copyright is difficult. It depends on where it was published and the dates and all sorts of things. And copyright is not a binary thing, so all of these books could be made available to the blind. Right? There's an international treaty. If it is something your teacher has assigned to you in the course of your instruction, the Delhi University cases, you're able to use that material even if it's in copyright. And so this was a total overreaction by the government. And it's ironic that I have the only copy of the digital library now. We've had 35 million views on this in the last year and a half. It's incredibly popular. We've got books in 50 languages, 35,000 in Sanskrit, 20,000 in Telugu. Now, the scans are bad. The metadata is bad. There are missing pages. They didn't do any quality assurance. And so we've been trying to make it a little better. We've had volunteers go through all 20,000 of the Telugu books. Now, what the government did when they typed in the metadata, they transcribed the titles into Roman script. Now, there's an international standard for how to do that, but they didn't follow the international standard. They just did it willy-nilly. And so I've had volunteers take all 20,000 of those books and retype the title and creator Telugu. So it's now searchable. They fixed the dates. We've got other people doing it in Canada. And so we're trying to make this database a little better since the only thing we have. But there's a core lesson. This needs to be redone. right? This is not going to be sufficient. It's better than nothing. Like, it is the largest library of Indian books on the internet right now, I believe. Now, there's many existing efforts out there in India to digitize things. So Sabarmati Ashram has the Gandhi Heritage Portal, which is pretty good. They scanned a lot of good stuff, but it's inside of a reader. And so inside the reader, you can flip pages, and inside of there is a low-resolution JPEG. You can't download a high-res PDF of the book. And you can download pages like 1 through 10. So if you get Hind Swaraj, for example, the 1919 version of Hind Swaraj, and you go, print pages 1 through 10, every single page says copyright Gandhi Heritage Portal, all rights reserved. And if you're looking at the title page, I don't know if you remember the title page to Hind Swaraj, it says no rights reserved. Gandhiji did do copyright on his autobiography because he wanted to control the translation quality. But that was the only time he asserted copyright. And as a general rule, he was like, knock yourself out, translate my stuff, I don't care. He was a prolific user of other journals when he was in South Africa. The National Archives of India have been digitizing things, but in order to view them, you have to have a special login. You go to their new portal. They have this really weird digitized on-demand thing in which you say, I'd like this, and then they eventually get back to you and they charge you money, and even then there's no bulk download. You can't say, I want all the letters of Sardar Patel because I want to do big data research on them. Tamil Nadu government has been scanning books, and many of these places use an IT contractor to do it. And my friend, Professor Chalapathy, is the leading historian of the book in India. And I heard a story that what happens is these IT contractors are paid by the page, and so they'll scan the same page 10 times, right? More money. So there's a gatekeeper syndrome out there. Everybody wants to digitize, but they want it on their system. They're not making it available in bulk. They're not putting it in multiple locations. Now, the rule of thumb on the internet is if you want your data to live forever, you can't be the only one that has it. Even if you've got a hot backup, right? Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts has a beautiful National Cultural Audiovisual Archives, 30,000 videos. It's on their server, and they have a hot backup in Bangalore. But here's what happens. I've been doing this a long time. Human error is how this gets screwed up, right? So you do something on your hot copy, and you push it to your backup, and then you discover later you screwed it all up. And so if you want your archive to live forever, it needs to be in 3 independent places. My friend Paul Vixie, who did the DNS software, has this rule. And it can't be on tape. It's got to be spinning, right, on disk. And that means that every couple of years you need to respin it, right? You need to add new disk and copy it over. And if you want your archives to stay live, you have to do that. And you must have bulk access, because there's always somebody smarter than you out there. Right? If there's somebody else who's able to take your data and do something with it, like I did by coupling the audio files of Gandhiji with the collected works, you should welcome that activity, right? You shouldn't be preventing it. And so that's an issue. So the question is, how do we get to doing something different? And I think one of the keys is doing high-quality digitization here in India. Now, we have a lot of vendors that are willing to sell you a $10,000 scanner. I've been to many places where they have these things, and they get installed, and nobody knows how to use them, and they don't get used very often, and then they scan some books, and I'm like, so where are they? Well, they're on disk. We haven't put them online. It's like, can I have a disk drive? I'll put them online for you. Well, we're still considering the implications. So I have been, luckily, working with the Indian Academy of Sciences. I gave a lecture in this room for them. I scanned all their books, put them online, 59 books, and no copyright issues on that, but the collected works of C.V. Raman. And I got Rooster Kale to give me a TT scribe, a tabletop scribe. This is their high-end scanners. They cost about $13,000. It's got 3 cameras on it. So 2 of the cameras are pointing down to a V platform. So you put your book on that, and there's a pedal. And you press the pedal, and the book goes up to the glass, and you hit a button, and it takes the picture. You let the pedal up, and it comes down, and you flip the page. So this is non-destructive scanning. And once you learn how to use one of these things, you can do 500 to 800 pages an hour because you get in a rhythm, right? Pedal down, click, pedal down, click. And at first, as we have a guy who actually just began learning this, and he was able to do 407 pages in like 43 minutes. So these are great devices, but you have to learn how to use them. So I gave them this TT Scribe, and we got it installed, and I got it up and working. And then it kind of sat there because the idea was that their IT manager would manage it. Well, their IT manager's got other things to do. He's got several hundred people to support. They were going to hire a couple people, but, it's down in the basement. It's only one device, and, you can't hire some young person and have them sit there for 8 hours hitting the pedal alone with no tech support there. So it wasn't getting used. I had visited other efforts, like in Bangalore, there is a foundation, the Konkani Cultural Foundation. Again, it has one of these scanners that wasn't being used. In Chennai, I had given several tech talks, and I had met folks that were beginning to do scanning. And I finally had an insight, which is, so when I go see a library, I talk about digitization. What they think is, if you give me $1 million, we'll buy a bunch of scanners, hire a vendor, and we'll begin digitizing. And that never works. Or if it works, it doesn't work very well. And it just seemed to me that it needs to be more than an institutional thing. So I've created an effort I call the Servants of Knowledge. Hat tip to Mr. Gokhale, right? And my idea is this. I've given a lot of tech talks in India. So I went to my friends in Chennai, the guy who runs the Linux users group. I know a lot of folks here in Bangalore that are really good tech folks. In Bangalore, I have a friend who runs an engineering company that's got 40 engineers working for him. He's very talented. And the question is, what if you put these tech people together with these physical scanners and some really good content and a facility? So I went to the Indian Academy of Sciences and said, look, here's what I want to do. I want to bring in some of my own people, and they're going to learn how to operate this scanner. And the Indian Academy actually had a talented young engineer working as an administrative assistant. So he and 3 other volunteers have now taken over this box for me. And they came in, they immediately got it back up and running. It was really pretty amazing. And they've learned how to use it. And they are going to be training the trainers. So their job in January is to get really good at using the scanner, learn how to do the systems administration, learn how to push it out to the Internet Archive. And then come back in February, and we're going to bring in more people, right, get them trained. And we're going to try to make it fun. So, like, if you're a student, we're going to certify you, so you'll have something for your resume. I'm a certified scan level 1, expert. If you scan a book, we'll put your name on it. This book was scanned by so-and-so. We'll do awards banquets. Name the best scanner in India. Right? Have a scanning Olympics. Develop procedures to how this gets done. So when someone else walks in and says, we really want to do this, you can say, well, look, why don't you come down to the Indian Academy of Sciences and we'll teach you what we're doing. Right? You'll need some tech people, you'll need a facility, you'll need some content, here's our procedures manual. And the idea is, can we do a distributed kind of effort that starts to take up steam? So, for example, in Bangalore, we're going to be at the Konkani Cultural Foundation. And if we can get a couple scanners donated there, maybe I can find some rich Gujarati and say, you should donate scanners to the Sabarmati Ashram. Right? Go to Calcutta, same thing. There's a tremendous archive of Bangla literature that needs to be scanned. And each of these places I've gone to the people that run it and said, look, what if we're scanning more than just your stuff? So Indian Academy is going to primarily be science stuff. They want to do old journals. But what if these guys bring in some Kannada books? Because, this thing's not going to be used 24 hours a day. And they were like, okay, that's fine. That's not a problem. And so we're going to try to make it a club, an association, Servants of Knowledge. So we've got 3 chapters started. Right now it's just been organizational meetings with my lead tech people. In February, we're going to try to move it to the next level. I'm going to try to bring 5 more of these TT Scribes into the country, but frankly, your custom service is a real pain in the neck to deal with sometimes. And so we're trying to learn how to reverse engineer these things with the blessings of the Internet Archive. And we think we can actually fabricate these fancy devices in India significantly cheaper. And so we're looking at doing things that way. So that's one side, is digitization. The other side, remember, this is a workflow, right? You got your book. It needs to get hosted someplace. OCR needs to happen. It needs to be hosted forever. There needs to be access. There needs to be a user interface. And the Internet Archive is very nice because you can do bulk downloads from there. So like I said, whenever I come to India, when I'm at home, I go IA, download Hind Swaraj, and I let it chug for a couple weeks, and the next thing I know, I've got a little disk drive full of the data. I have installed, I'm working with JNU, with their School of Computational and Integrative Sciences, and we have 48 8-terabyte disk drives spinning on 2 RAID arrays, so this is 400 terabytes of disk. And the idea of the JNU Data Depot is we're going to be able to slice off parts of the Internet Archive, bring it to India, put it on the National Knowledge Network, and then let every university in India download this stuff. And the hope is that we start getting innovative user interfaces. So rather than just a little bitty disk drive, here, collected works of Gandhi, the idea is, can we put the entire digital library of India on this thing? And we're just beginning that process. I have the formal agreement with JNU. We've got doctoral students assigned to it. I'm working with the former dean. And it's getting there. So these are baby steps. Let me tell you the bigger vision. My friend Brewster Kale at the Internet Archive is scanning 1 to 2 million books a year. He had a super scan center in Hong Kong with a lot of these scribes. He has since moved into the Philippines, but this is 100 scan stations employing 200 people. He sends in shipping containers full of books, and they get scanned. He also has subsidiary scanning stations in places like the Library of Congress and others. And I really, instead of having him do it in the Philippines, I tried to get him to do his super scan center in India. We just couldn't get our act together. We went to IIT Madras, to their research park. We interviewed potential vendors. And the Philippines does this all the time for the big content providers, and they had him up and running in 3 months. But I'd like to do it in India because I think, there's something here that is absolutely unique. I am estimating there are 20 to 30 million books in India that need to be digitized. Everything from palm leaves to, Gujarat Vidyapith has the incredible Gujarati collection. National Library of India has collections. It's all over, and it's all these different languages. And no one else is going to scan these. Right? So the Internet Archive might scan books in French and in English, but they're not going to do the Hindi books. And they're not going to be able to do them because we're not going to be able to put these things in shipping containers. So in the U.S., our libraries are de-accessioning books. They're getting rid of them. And so that's what he's doing. He's going to these libraries that are getting rid of books. He says, put them in a shipping container, and we'll scan them. And unlike Google Books, his books are all available. Some of them are in copyright. And for the copyright books, he makes them available to the blind, and he has a lending program. So what he does is if he owns a physical copy of the book, you can lend that. So what he does is he keeps a physical copy and he lets you borrow the digital version, right? He keeps a physical copy here and you can check it out, and when you're done, you can check it in again. This is pushing a little far in the copyright world, but I believe it's legal, and he believes it's legal, and it's a very innovative way of doing things. And so what he'll do is he'll have 10 copies of some books, and so he can loan 10 copies at a time. It's very much a library model. I think we can do this in India. And I think we can do a system that doesn't have gatekeepers, that is distributed, that truly realizes, a vision of an archive. And if you can do that, if you can put the books online and host them, maybe you can go a step further and make internet access a universal right. It's something we've tried to do before. Sam tried to do the Pancharajas, right, fiber optic out to those. It's getting better, but in many of the rural areas, it's not good at all. Maybe the solution is you carve off chunks and you move it into the villages and you make it accessible locally, right, on a local Wi-Fi. I don't know the answer, but I know if we don't start, it's going to take a decade. But if we spend $200 million a year digitizing in India over a decade, that's $2 billion. That's half of a Sardar Patel statue. And look what you would get out of that. I want to leave you with a thought. Now, when you think of bread labor and Gandhiji, you think of state, right? But bread labor started at the Phoenix Ashram. When they first put the Phoenix Ashram way out in the wilderness, the very first thing they did is they got 16 ox carts, and they took their printing press in Durban, and they loaded it on these ox carts, and they hauled it into the wilderness. And they didn't build shelter for themselves. They built a shelter for the printing press, and then they finally built their own houses. And everybody at the Phoenix Ashram had to typeset every day. That was their bread labor, was typesetting. It was something that everyone had to do. Gandhiji even did it every day. He was lousy at typesetting. made a lot of mistakes, but he tried. Gandhiji was also a prolific printer, right? He pulled in stuff from, I don't know if you've seen Young India and Indian Opinion and Harijan and all these resources out there. He was the most amazing blogger ever. If you read like Young India from 1928, 1929, this is when he was traveling. Like he would go to Bengal and he would go to 32 cities in 28 days, right? Every day he'd do the night train, he'd give 5 talks, and then on the night train he'd write some piece. And if you look at every Young India article issue, there's going to be 4 or 5 articles by him in there. So I think this is a very Gandhian thing to do. And I've been going around India saying, the service of knowledge is what we should do. Jagyan, right? Victory in knowledge. And to me, scanning is the new spinning. Everyone should be doing bread labor. And I see no reason why we can't make scanning something that we do. Not that the government is going to do for us, but something that we do. So that's a vision of a public library in India. It's an early vision. I have no idea if it'll work. As I told you, my vision for a digital public library of India didn't happen. But I think all you can do is try. And I'll be spending the next couple of years. I spend every other month in India. I was here all of August, all of October, all of December. I'll be back in February. And I may even up my time in the country. So that's the hope. We'll see if it actually happens. So thank you very much. More than happy to take questions. No questions at all?
No. I think, thank you for giving the perspective and the need for digital. But in your talk, I see a sort of a fighting against the system which is in place. While, maybe you have to find out to make things all right. But in the whole ecosystem of publishing and bringing quality into it, is this fight is an outlier, or is it going to be the thing in the future?
So
today, the current generation of information is already in the digital mode. So it's only a question of getting the right to publish. The old one, yes, the scanning and putting them. So I was just trying to, if you thought when you were giving the lecture, I was just thinking, are we fighting against a system which is already there, trying to protect itself, but may not be able to protect us too long? But where do we see this going?
So I don't think it is fighting against the system. So I believe that the publishers are actually keeping up with technology. They're doing a pretty good job, and they're solving their problem in copyright works. There's some edge cases, like once I bought your work, may I lend it to someone else? But as a general rule, I'm a strong supporter of copyright, right? I made my living writing books for 10 years. Government works, on the other hand, are not readily available, and the back file is not. And you cannot have a true public library without that vast resource that's sitting out there. And by that, I mean not just the stuff from before 1900. I mean the stuff, the orphan works, the things that were published and are not available anymore, that ought to be available. And it's not really fighting against the system. It is doing a distributed venture. So the internet was built as a distributed network. Our governments, the Department of Defense in particular, had another vision of the internet called Open Systems Interconnect, which is very much a top-down design, right? The telephone company would do everything for you. And we came up with this much more distributed system that actually worked, right? And the problem with that top-down approach is it didn't work. And ours did, and it scaled very quickly. And that's my vision of a public library of India, is one that has many people involved, including governments, but that people are there to help the government, that you don't just hire a fancy contractor doing 10-year, contract, that you have people helping show the way, right? That if government can see what we're doing at the Indian Academy of Sciences and go, well, maybe there's a better thing we could do, and their standards go up. And all the other libraries, their standards go up. And that's why I think you need this distributed system. So it shouldn't be a fight, although I understand it's going to be contentious.
Maybe I can clarify when I say, why I got a feeling fight in the system is that you're suggesting certain, either you call it loopholes or an interpretation in your own way to share the information.
So I believe that copyright has moved too much in the wrong direction. I believe it has moved away from the fundamental principles of copyright to increase innovation. The things I do, such as publishing works of government in India, I believe are right, and I may bear the consequences, but if I have to, I can stand before a judge and talk about the right to education and the role of government, and I have a reasonable story. Same thing with the lending library. So yes, we are trying to pull copyright back. In particular, the course of instruction provision of copyright and the visually impaired. I do think it needs a bit of a readjustment. But I believe that copyright has moved very much in the ultra-conservative binary model of it's either mine or it's not mine. And that's not how copyright works. You ought to be able to take one paragraph out of any book, and that's fair use, right? If you're blind, and so it isn't like it's a bundle of rights. And I believe some publishers, not all of them, have misunderstood the purpose of copyright. And this is a topic I've spoken about with a lot of intellectual property folks. I'm not a lawyer, but I've had to learn a lot about copyright law because of the work that I do. And I spent a tremendous amount of time in India talking to people like Professor Shamnat Bashir, who was here, Professor Lawrence Yang. My lawyers are all very good in this area. Professor Gopal Krishnan down at CUSAT wrote the Copyright Act amendments. And we've had big discussions about that. And we want to do this in a methodical way. I try very hard not to break the law. I might push it a little bit. But I always have to have a story. When I give lectures about civil resistance, one of my messages is if you're the only one throwing stones at that window, you're doing it wrong. Right? That's not how you do satyagraha. But you have to present the issues, and sometimes that requires a raising of awareness. I think the best example of that in India is Aruna Roy and KSS, right, with the right to information. It took her 25 years to get the RTI Act in. And it was a fundamental change in India. Somehow the RTI Act is not always being observed the way it was meant to. But that fundamental insight is farmers weren't getting the money from the government that they deserved for their work programs in Rajasthan, and the reason was the government was cooking the books. It took her 25 years to get that vision across. So I think it might take some time. But at the end of the day, we had this with the internet. Governments and big companies thought we were nuts. And there was a decade of what I call the internet wars, in which we were really like going head to head with these big operations, the European Union and others, and yet we were able to build this decentralized network, and it's become a little less decentralized now. It's become much more cloud, but it's a decentralized network. You can still run a web server on your laptop. You can invent a new protocol and layer it on TCP, and so there's still the opportunity to innovate. And I think a library's got to be the same thing, right? It's got to be a distributed. What we need are standards, not contractors, right? So we don't need a cloud service for a library. We need standards saying, here's how to scan, here's how to do metadata, and we need to teach people what those are. And that's the only way we're going to do those 20, 30 million books. And I think the government knows that. They've been trying to digitize, and frankly, the efforts they've been doing haven't been that impressive. I mean, they're trying hard, but they're not at scale. They're not moving at a level that they need to be. And if we don't, we're going to lose books. I mean, look at Kerala after the floods. They lost so many things. In Chennai, termites are going into very important archives. This is happening all over the country. So it's something that needs to be done. Yes, sir.
So now you're talking about mostly the scanning of the existing documents.
Yes.
But there is one area, a lot of information is available but not made public, even to the professionals, as the medical records.
Mm-hmm.
So even in India, I always tell my students several years that even in one department in a medical college, if they give one case study per month,
mm-hmm.
you will have nearly 20,000 records.
Yeah.
And if it is properly done, and our students will have excellent access to medical knowledge. Right now it is there.
I agree.
I want to know, do you have any example anywhere in the world where really made an attempt to digitize the medical records from various hospitals together and then made it public?
Yeah, there are U.S. efforts to...
Case studies I'm talking about, which Because
Yeah.
in India, even the professional doctors cannot access the record of another hospital.
So this is not necessarily my area anymore. I used to look for big government databases laying fallow or ones that should exist, and I would try to make those available. I have shifted my focus a little bit now on a broader focus on things. So it's not an area I'm an expert in. I believe there are some experts. I think you should talk to him. I think he knows. He can give you some good examples of those. But again, it's not an area I focus. I'm interested in those things, but I'm kind of obsessive.
So I try my best to explore that possibility and come on to the national database of medical records.
Yeah. Now, all those things need to happen. I'm not saying a public library of India is the only thing that needs to happen. I believe there's many other.
You can have access to it. Ordinary physicians on the street,
Well,
he
remember,
doesn't have access to any medical records.
Well, remember my initial vision of a digital public library of America was I was focusing on digitizing our federal government, including databases of that sort. And the reason I ended up moving out of that effort is, first of all, I was busy getting sued over by making standards available, but also because I couldn't get the DPLA board to view that as an important
point. See, most of the talk you said the copyright comes on your way. Correct?
I'm sorry?
Copyright is a major issue, and that really blocks some of the digitization aspects.
Oh, it's an issue.
In this case, it is not the copyright.
Yeah.
They're talking about the data. Yeah. The hospitals are willing to sell it without the knowledge of the patients, but they are not willing to allow the access to medical professionals.
Yeah, I think that's wrong. I mean, that's simply wrong. Yeah, anytime, I will buy the idea that for privacy reasons the data should not be available. I do, and I have the same issue with the law. I do not buy the argument that it's only available if you have a lot of money. And if that's the case, it probably ought to be public. And that was the case with the law in the United States when I first started doing it, is if you could afford Lexis or West, you could do the Court of Appeals opinions. And what I did is I bought the Court of Appeals opinions from one of the vendors. I paid $600,000 for those, and I put them on the internet for anybody to use. So when it's a paywall, then I think it's wrong. And that data should be much more broadly available, particularly public resources. I am a strong supporter of Penguin supporting Ramachandra Guha's new Gandhi book, and he ought to make as much money on that. And by the way, it's an amazingly good book. But when it is a public resource, then it needs to be available.
The government hospital is a public resource.
Absolutely.
My medical record in government hospital is a public resource.
Yep.
That is not made available.
Yep. I agree.
Sure. Yeah. Have you had discussions with the state libraries in various state capitals?
I have visited some state libraries, and many of them. So typically, what happens when you visit a library, they are already digitizing, and they will show you what they're doing. They're typically not going to make that data available. But some of them, Osmania, for example, had 2,000 Telugu books that they slapped up, or Urdu books that they slapped up on the net, and we made a copy. I'm actually mirroring the Tamil Nadu government server. They have 8,600 books. But in terms of working with them, they're looking for someone with a lot of money that's going to give them the money, and they're going to use it to buy more scanners and do the digitization. And that's why I'm trying to come up with this distributed model in which we can say, come visit us at the Indian Academy. Let me show you what we're doing. And there's another way to do this. Because many of them end up buying these $10,000 or $15,000 scanners from a variety of vendors. And many of them are not open source based. You got to have a Windows box, and they're just not the right solution. And in order to convince them of that, we need to move from the model of I want to digitize, so I'm going to hire a company. It's got to be, the knowledge has to be in the libraries on what they want, and then maybe you hire a company, but you tell that company what you're going to do. And that's what I do with my vendors. When I was doing double keying of text, I told them exactly how I wanted it. It wasn't like they came to me and said, we're just going to scan these. I said, no, I want them in HTML. I want the following tags on there. And I was a client that knew what I wanted. And a lot of these libraries aren't sure. They know they want it done. Same problem with government. You get somebody who issues a contract, and they're not an expert on scanning. They're not bringing in outside help to advise them. And that's one of the things I'm doing, is knocking on doors. And anyone who's willing to talk, I'm more than happy to talk, and to bring in other experts. And again, raise that level of consciousness, because I think that's what needs to happen.
Okay. Just another question. Scanning is only one part of the workflow, right? Eventually, you still want that text also to become searchable and things like that. somebody will have to enter that in Unicode, in HTML, and
Well, OCR is getting better.
right. So that's for the Roman languages, but the Indian language books. I mean, what would be a good model for getting these scans up onto the Internet archives?
OCR is getting better on Indian languages. Google Vision is pretty good. There's some Chinese solutions that do Indian language as well. Amazon has gotten into the business. They're using artificial intelligence. So it's much more flexible. It isn't, do I recognize this character? It's given the stream of characters, what do I expect to see here? Or is it this, is it that? So it's getting better. Internet Archive is not doing that now, and one of my goals next year is to understand how to use Google Vision to run OCR and then shoehorn it back into the Internet Archive. That's a research project. But it's getting better. It's getting better. Now, the wiki source folks, they're actually retyping them to try to make it perfect, which is nice, but they're not going to operate at the scale of hundreds of thousands of books. And job one is once you scan them, then you can run OCR many different times. So as your OCR gets better, but if you haven't scanned them properly, like the Digital Library of India, then you're just never going to be able to do it. And so job one is to get it scanned and hosted, and then all that value added on top. You want more than just OCR. What you want is, so Brewster's vision is that when you read a book and there's a footnote, you can click on that footnote and go to the other book. I actually just did that with Ram Guha's book. He has 100 pages of footnotes. And I ripped them out and scanned them and ran them through OCR, and it was really tedious because OCR, you lose your italics. And so I spent probably 5 weeks on this and turned it into an HTML file and made as many of the links as I could that he had in there live. And so he has, in 100 pages of footnotes, 999 links into the collected works. And now when you click on it, it goes to that volume and that page. I've got hot links into the autobiography. I've got into the Nami Jivan trust books, into a whole bunch of old government reports I was able to find. And that was a brute force demonstration of how to do that. But eventually, how do we move up? For the table of contents, if you're looking at the table of contents, you ought to be able to click on the page number and go there automatically. Right? Yes, sir.
It was a fascinating talk, and I'm really inspired by your Gandhian idea. I don't know when it turned up Gandhian, but it doesn't matter. The whole idea is fascinating. But I'm more interested to know more about the economy involved in this. The economy, based on which you are becoming part of this project, like where you are investing your own time, or like the team which is involved in doing this thing. But as you have said, as you have explained, that you are working with different organizations, so there are multiple organizations, multiple actors all involved in this. So what is the whole economy like, which is behind there? But at the same time, like there is another aspect related with it, and that can be termed as, you would be aware about this, Internet of Things. So overall, like when Internet of Things, so whatever available, like if we talk about archives. So archives, like they were available in different material form, like in written form or in any other form. But now everything is being digitalized. So by digitalizing, we are also creating a different kind of economy. So someone else will be also going to benefit out of this. Like for example, let's say Google or any other company will come in the future. So like how to understand where the control is going away from government institutions to other kinds of institutions.
Yeah. So public parks should be usable. I believe that data should not just be non-commercial use only. So I have no problem if Google takes this and works with it. Anyone else? My organization is a charity. We're funded by a grant from Arcadia Foundation, which is a UK-based foundation. I've worked with them for many years. Many of these operations that I'm talking to, the Indian Academy of Sciences, have their own funding base, so their facilities are paid for that way. My hope is to get sponsors to pay for the scanners, so you go to someone and say you ought to donate it because it's good. Many of my lead tech people are volunteers, and these are the same kinds of people that volunteer on the Wikimedia, do hackathons, run Linux user groups. And so I think a lot of those resources can be available. I did some math. I think if you're doing a couple million books a year, it's probably a couple $100 million a year to do that. So it's again $2 billion over a decade. I think that is somewhat peanuts by the whole country kind of level. And I think this can maybe even be done in a fully decentralized way. I think probably some government money will get involved. But I think foundations and others, particularly if this starts to pick up steam. But right now I'm trying to do this in a decentralized way. So one of the things I make very clear when I go to talk to people is like, look, I'm not a grant-making organization, right? I got enough money to pay for myself. I have a little bit of money for hardware, travel expenses, but I'm not here to give you money. And I try to make that very clear. I met a foundation here in Bangalore that is digitizing things. And I talked about this guy wants to digitize every Sanskrit book. And he's got some scanner that's not very good. He scanned a bunch of books manually. He wants to do every book. And I was very clear that I'm not here to give you money, but I explained that he could move towards. So he has scanned 10,000 books, but only has 100 online. I said, well, let's get your 10,000 online. Why don't you come use the Indian Academy of Sciences scanner and use it, and then you start having a better story about why. Because he was complaining that the only money he gets are very small donations, and he needs more money. And I said, you're not quite ready to do that yet. So you need to take these steps to have a better story, which, I thought we had a nice conversation, and then 2 days later, he's sending me notes, essentially demanding that I give him gifts of, he wanted a copy of the digital library made. And I said, well, that's actually very hard to make, right? It's big, really big. And actually, I don't think you have the hardware to be able to host it, right? Because he's got a little Synology box. But at the end of the day, all he wanted was money. And then go off and do his own thing. And that's not what I do. And it's not how the internet was built. So I'm looking for people that want to work together. And that's one of the issues I have with some of these other organizations. Is many of them they want the money and then they'll go do it on their own. And there's places you can go to for those kinds of funds, but it's frankly they haven't done a very good job so far. And I think we need to raise the standards. So the money is a bit catch and catch can. Right? Running an NGO is not easy. I went for 2 years in which I didn't pay myself 6 months of each year because that was the only way to pay the contractors and the rent and everything. Yes.
So it's a little bit provocative or maybe out of the box question. You said that the libraries are closing or the bookstores are closing. Then what's the point of digitizing books if nobody wants to read them? So your effort is just for the people who really small group of people who just
I had 35 million views on the Public Library of India. You'd be shocked at how many people read. And frankly, if you make the information more readily available, more people will read. I found that every database I put online. So I went to do the Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC's argument was that normal people wouldn't need this stuff. These are the filings of our big corporations, right? Their annual reports. With Google IPOs, they filed it with the SEC. And they were selling the data. They were selling it to a vendor who sold it to retailers who sold each report for $20. And their argument was that the only people who cared about this stuff were a couple of fat cats on Wall Street. Why bother, right? Why subsidize their use? And I put that database online, and I had millions and millions and millions of views in 1994 when the net wasn't that big. I think you put the books online, people start reading them. I know that with Indian standards, I get 1 million views every month on those, and that's far more than the Bureau ever got. I think people are smart, and I think there's a tremendous unmet thirst for knowledge, particularly in the regional universities. Right? If you're here, you have access to a lot of the materials you need. Although I bet a lot of you go to Sci-Hub to get the things that you can't get. And I think just folks like you getting the data you need that's a worthwhile goal right there. But I think you'll be shocked as to how many people. I spoke at the Bangalore Literature Festival, and I know that's a kind of high-tone crowd, but I mean, they had several thousand people coming to this thing. I saw Ram Guha's talk, and they were hanging from the rafters to listen to him. Same thing with Shashi Tharoor. I think you got to treat people like they're smart, and if you do that, they'll show you that they're smart. And I think one reason they don't go to bookstores is the bookstores are uncomfortable and they're expensive. And I think if people want to read, but bookstores are like record stores. They haven't evolved with the times, and that's they've partly shot themselves in the foot. But I think you can reinvent these things. It's like radio was dying when I started the first radio station on the internet, and radio's doing just fine now. All the radio stations are on the net, and it's actually growing. So they need to keep up with the times. That's the problems we've had with the movies and with the music companies, is they're trying very hard, and the publishers in some cases. They're trying to keep their old model in place no matter what, and they're not evolving. So I think people will read. They may not read all the stuff that I post, but I noticed my Hinswell Raj collection doesn't get nearly as many views as Digital Library of India, even though I think the content is way better. But for people search on Google and they find this book or that book and they go read it. So, a couple more questions and then we'll be done.
I think there's a lot of government work that need to be liberated from deadwood, and not all of it is laws and regulations. Especially in the case of India, there's a lot of data that's actually.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And for example, I would love to have all of India's census reports, as data instead of as scanned things. So when I look at them, and I actually spent some time searching for data that I could actually use, and then you can only go back 3 censuses, not 10 or 15. So I was wondering whether if there could be a special project that focuses on trying to look at those aspects of what would be scanned that are actually data, and then try to digitize those as data.
So in the U.S., I put the Internal Revenue Service nonprofit returns online, and they were selling them as DVDs. And each DVD had 60,000 low-res, one-page TIFF images, and every month I'd get 30 DVDs, and at the end there was a little index file that said these pages are this return. And I processed 2,000 of these stupid things. So the IRS required all large filers to e-file their returns, right? Nice XML data. And I went to them and said, I want your e-file data. And they said, no. We make them available already. It doesn't fall under FOIA. And so we sued them. And we went to court. It took us 2 years. And that led to a precedent-setting decision that the IRS had to release the 9 files we asked for as e-file. And they said, but it'll cost $9,000 as our fees. And we said, fine, we're just talking money now. And so the judge said, grant it. At which point we said, and we want a fee waiver because this is in the public interest. So they charged us $9,000 and we got it down to 0. Now that only gave me 9 for $1.5 million. So I called my friends at the Washington Post and New York Times, and they all filed FOIA requests. At which point the IRS saw the writing on the wall and they released all $1.5 million. So I guess my suggestion is that census isn't doing the right thing. Start by knocking on their door, and I suspect the answer will be no. Do an RTI suit and ask for the electronic version and say it falls under RTI. I bet it does. It might take you a couple of years, but it would be an important precedent. So I mean that's your effort. The thing about doing something like this is it's really easy to say, there needs to be this, there needs to be that. The more important thing is what can I do? What can I do? And so pick one area and just run it. I know you could find a really good lawyer to work with you pro bono on this, so it wouldn't cost money. And it would be a significant accomplishment and would help all your colleagues. Yes, sir.
In case of BIS, it's a government entity, so they don't have this cost overhead that you spoke of in case of non-profit organizations back in the US. So what is their argument for not having these building codes and all these standards?
Their argument is that they're allowed to charge under the Standards Act. They're allowed to have copyright, that they're not making a profit on their sales. Now, 98% of their revenue is from certification, because if you sell products in India, they have to be certified. The real reason is all their fellow standards bodies. So they have 2 groups of peers. They're part of a ministry, right? They have to deal with that. But they do joint ventures with the American National Standards Institute, and they go to fancy conferences in Europe with ASTM, and everyone else sell these things, and they're telling them, do not cave in on this, because it'll be the end of the world. So they're kind of doing it because I know for a fact that groups like ASTM have lobbied groups like BIS pretty heavily not to cave in. And I think they're going to have no choice at the end of the day, because they are government agencies. One reason I found India attractive, because this is different than the usual model. So in Europe, they claim that it's a standards development organization, but it's funded by the EU, and it takes direction from the EU, and it develops standards, and then every standards body in India, in Europe, has 6 months to implement it as a national standard with no changes. And they claim that's a voluntary system, and I just don't buy it. So we're trying to press that point in Europe. So the main reason is that it's the way it's done all over the world. they wouldn't admit that, but I think it's because they go to very fancy conferences with their friends from ANSI, and they stay in nice hotels, and they get joint ventures. There's pictures of the ANSI president and the IS president, waving a flag, and
I just have one.
Okay, so one last question.
See, I've been thinking about this making things accessible to everyone. That's what you were emphasizing. But there's another aspect of it is that what drives to quality data, quality information. Today, it is the publishers trying to get the good authors. Authors would expect some remuneration.
Yeah.
So it's a cycle going on.
But I'm not talking about the publishing business, right? I'm very clear that they're doing their own job.
Yeah, but then that makes it available on open. Actually, that's what we're trying now. Then are we ending up in a conflict at some stage?
So, that is the argument I hear from some folks, that we have to have the data because we'll make it high quality and other people will do the best job.
Would it lead to, and what are your thoughts about it? Would it lead to a problem, or would you foresee continuing it?
I don't see a problem. The publishers are dealing with new commercial things, and they do very high quality work, and they're making it available in innovative ways. Many of them charge reasonable prices, partly because Amazon has decided it was. But they're adjusting to the world. But there's this vast set of resources, including the backfile and public data and things that are not available, and we won't have a true publishing ecosystem. And I think if you're going to do the public data properly, you can't say this person is the one responsible for all census data. You got to make it available. Some random grad student will take it and turn it into XML and build a better website. And I think that's how you're going to get high quality data. You won't do it by saying I am the only one allowed to have this. That will just never happen. First of all, because if you're saying something like that, you probably don't care about the quality that much. A couple of these sites are okay, but you can always do things differently. And we need to encourage that, and we need to encourage quality standards in a distributed way so everybody looks at it. I look at some of these sites and I go, oh my God, this is awful. But many people are like, oh, hey, well, it works in their room, click, 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 click. And I'm like, well, would you prefer to have a PDF file or the EPUB version, right, or the searchable version? God forbid. On my site, if you get a quote from Gandhi, some random quote, I had this in a book that wasn't footnoted. You take the quote, you throw it into the Internet Archive, and it comes up and it says Volume 42, and you click on Volume 42, and it opens into that page and highlights your text. And that wouldn't happen if we just did the way that the Gandhi Heritage Portal was trying to do. I think you have quality in the distributed world. And what we learned with the Internet is the OSI protocols, the centralized version, didn't work very well. The IETF version was decentralized, and here's a closing story. So when Bob Kahn and Vint Cerf invented the transmission control protocol, so the Internet is based on TCP/IP. So IP just takes a packet and throws it into the net. It's called a best effort delivery service. TCP takes all those packets and sequences them so that on the other side you get your data in order. And when they first introduced TCP, it didn't work. Because what was happening is you throw your packets into the net, and then the other side would say, I didn't get packet 35, so you throw packet 35 again. And then 30 seconds later, you get, I didn't get packet 35, so you throw it into the net. Well, what happened is in the middle, the network was congested. And so every time you threw this new packet in, you were making it even worse, right? And so the Internet melted down. And there was this guy at University of California, Berkeley, that came up with a 12-line patch, and it's called the back-off algorithm. It says when they say, I don't have packet 35, you send it and you wait 30 seconds. And say, I don't have it, you send it and then you wait a minute. And say, I don't have it, you send it and you wait 2 minutes. And that way you're alleviating the congestion rather than making it worse. But again, if it had been designed by Bob Kahn and Vint Cerf, who are very good, the Internet wouldn't have worked. And that's what happened with the OSI protocols, is it was developed by a whole bunch of standards bureaucrats at ISO and DEC and IBM. And their protocols were extremely complicated. They're what we call Christmas trees. When someone tries to build a protocol, someone in the room says, well, we should have this, we should have that. And they put all these ornaments on the tree, and then the thing falls over. Whereas in the IETF, our philosophy was keep it simple. And in fact, our best protocols have the word simple. Simple network management protocol, simple mail transfer protocol. And we learned that makes things scale much more. Okay, thank you very much.
sign over to present you. Okay, please. Thank you.
It's small.